nicest part of the church is somebody's taking the weight off their feet there. You're very welcome to, if you need to. This area, as you can see, you can imagine why it's called the choir and the high altar. And this is the most intact part. And you can see here particularly, see the three levels. The Gothic arch is, of course, the pointed arch. And the reason they moved to it, I believe, is that it let them build taller, higher churches. The Romanesque was much more dumpy. It's lovely, but it is more solid on the ground. I must say I love it myself too. But these allowed them to go up and up and up in the Gothic arch. Now remember, this is from the 1100s. And the great cathedrals of Chartres and all over France and Italy are in this. This is kind of a copy of their style. Now, if you look around at the oak choir stalls, the boy choristers, or the choristers, sit in the front two rows. There is a school here from 1432, 1432, the oldest choir school in Europe. It has about 30 small children whose boys' voices aren't broken. They sing very high. Choristers, okay? When their voices break, they move on to the secondary school. There is a secondary school there too. The girls continue to sing. They've taken in girls in the last few years. And there is a secondary school there too. The door is interesting. On it is 1432, 1432. Just across as you go out, it's worth having a look at. And the school is there. Now, every morning here during term, they sing. And they sing also in the afternoon. And you're welcome to come, and it's free at the times of the services, okay? When they're holidays, the children, they're very generous children with their time, I'd imagine, to do it. The back row is for the clergy, and many of them would be singers too. Now, you may say, what are these strange hashmats and swords and these, see the coats of arms along the back? Remember that this was a church of the Crown of England, and the Crown was always giving out honours. Are you going to be Sir? Are you going to be this? Are you going to be that? If you're from the UK, you will know of the Knights of the Garter, or from Scotland, the Knights of the Thistle, and the Irish nobility felt that they should have an order of merit too. And the order was set up of the Knights of St. Patrick. Now, to be one, you had to be noble. In other words, you had to be a lord, an earl, a duke, or this, and that came from the king. Okay? And then you didn't get the honour unless you were exceptional, because there was only so many places, okay? So to be invited to be a knight was a big deal. And you were allowed to put your coat of arms behind your bench, and this was their chapel. You see how much the state was intertwined with the church. Now, in 1869, thunder, the church was disestablished, broken from the state. In Ireland, the majority were not Anglican. The majority were Catholic. The church and the state were separated, and the knights had to decamp and go down to the city hall, just down the road there, where St. Patrick's Hall is, the lovely Dublin Castle. Yes. Just down, and it's worth a visit. St. Patrick's Hall in there has the same stuff now. These are the flags of the men who were in place in 1870. And they kept them because they look lovely. The swords are only ceremonial. You would have had a big ceremony with your beautiful gear and clothes. You would have had been dubbed, and your family and everything would have been here. Big, big event, okay? Now, the last flag on the right, some of you may recognise. Especially people from the UK should recognise it up there. The very last flag on the right. Anyone guess what it is?
St. Andrews.
Fleur-de-lis and the harp and the thistle and the lion and the... Yes. It's the standard of the... Queen. Very good. Queen of England, Elizabeth II. The reason being that the monarch was always the head of the altar. And even though everybody is dead, the last man who was a knight died about 20 years ago, there's still a titular, it still exists in history. So they put up her standard, the Queen of England, okay? Someone said to me, why the little fleur-de-lis? Well, don't forget what I told you. The French conquered England way back 1066, and the lovely fleur-de-lis, the lily, came into, and it's on many of the tiles on the floor. Now, before I go rabbiting on all the time, I have a few more things to tell you here. Anyone got a question about this part?
Did the Queen come here a couple of years ago, well, quite recently?
When she came to St. Patrick's to Ireland, no, she didn't. My memory isn't that she came to any church. She was very tightly, I saw her all right and we were all delighted that she came, but I don't recollect that she came into a church. I could check that up. No, I think I would remember it if she did.
Just the Remembrance Garden.
She went to
The Remembrance, that was the public one, yes, yeah. And yes, but her ancestors would all have been here, and her grandfather would have been the last Supreme Knight of the Order, okay? And so, anyway, any other question, anyone, quickly, before I go on? No? Now, let's turn to the cabinet behind you, and it's on falling asleep in church. He could talk for 2 to 3 hours. And he had his man push the pulpit up beside the dozers who'd come in for a bit of heat and roar at them. So that was his pulpit. He was dean here for a good long period. He was born in Ireland, educated in Trinity, would have loved a career in politics in England, but it didn't work out. And he ended up as dean of this cathedral for a very long time, and he sort of took up the Irish cause a bit. He became a pamphleteer under pseudonyms. He called himself the Drapier, the seller of clothes, the Drapier's letters. And he, let's say, vindicated and argued for the rights of the Irish to be well-governed. He was Protestant now and very pro-Crown, well-governed, proper laws, not exploited, okay? One of his most famous pamphlets is called The Modest Proposal. And all this, by the way, is on Google. Everything you want here is on Google. Modest Proposal. Swift proposed that the poor were so poor that the best solution was to take some of their children at the age of 1 and fatten them up for the tables of the rich.
Oh my goodness.
At the age of 2. At the age of 2. It's a short pamphlet now. And he said, he goes into being Swift, Gulliver's Travels is his most famous writing, he goes into all sorts of possible details of dishes, which is you're sort of saying, oh, and then he says, people may think this is extreme, but I have suggested this, and this, all sensible things. Nobody thinks they're a good idea. That's a good idea. So I have come up with this as a drastic solution, and he says, since you have already devoured their parents, you can have no objection to devouring children. Which is very, very savage. And it's one of his most famous pieces of satire. And he is considered the greatest satirist in the English language. And when he died here, he had an involvement with 2 ladies, which makes him very intriguing. If you're interested in Jonathan Swift, look it up. There must be 5 or 6 books about who was who. Was he married to one of them? Had he an affair with one of them? There's details about it on the back of this plaque here. We're going to move down now and have a look at his epitaph. He wrote his own epitaph. Unusual as well. He wanted to be sure of what people were going to say about him. So here it is. Just down here. Okay. Are we down? We got everybody? Here's what's considered to be the most lifelike bust of Swift here. He lived to be 78. He was very much into exercise. Horse riding, and when he couldn't exercise, he used to run up and down Minot's Tower, the lovely tower that's outside. He used to run up and down the stairs for exercise. 78 was a real goodly age in those days. His likeness here, and behind you there is an image of his skull and some of his books. Now, Swift had a great fear of madness because he had an illness that caused him to fall down, and he said at one stage, "I'm like an old tree, I'm dying at the top." He felt his head was going. And when his body was excavated way back in the 1840s for renovations in the cathedral, they found he had a disease called Meniere's disease, which causes you to be very dizzy, to fall down, balance. Many people have it, and I know someone who has it and she's treated with medication, but she couldn't work or anything when she wasn't treated. Meniere's disease, bones in the ear, and that's probably what caused it. He left all his money to found a psychiatric hospital in Dublin, still going strong, St. Patrick's. And he wrote a little poem. He left what little wealth he had to build a home for fools and mad, that's what psychiatric were called at the time, and showed by one satiric touch, no nation needed it, so much himself. He ended up in the care of guardians. Afterwards, have a look at the books there. I'm going to just give you what he wrote about himself. When I was in school, a long time ago, we all had to do 6 years Latin, so I can read it, but the translation is there underneath. But I'm going to do you Yeats, our great national poet's translation. He did a more liberal translation. Swift has sailed unto his rest. Savage indignation there no more can lacerate his breast. Go, stranger, and imitate him if you dare. He served human liberty. And that's what Swift said about himself, okay? Now, that's Yeats's slightly more liberal translation, a nicer translation, I think. I think Yeats got the idea of writing his own epitaph from Swift, if you've been down at his grave. Now, the literal translation is underneath there. And the last thing we're going to have a look at is his actual place of burial under the stones here. Beside him is Stella. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Now, as I said, anyone who wants to stay for a moment or two, I've kept you a bit longer than I meant to, but you seemed to know a good deal and be interested. And anyone who wants to know anything else, just stay by, okay? So we'll go here.
It's very interesting.
So we have Swift's grave and Stella's grave, okay? Yeah. No, we just pull around here. See how old he lived to be? She died in her 40s. He was absolutely heartbroken. Now, he was her tutor. When he was 19, she was 7 or 8 in England. And they were extremely close. When he came to Dublin, she came with a companion and lived near him for the rest of her life. Gossip said that they were married. We don't know. We do know that he insisted they were buried beside each other. And he had another lady in his life, which was written about over there. You see on the panel, if you look around, very interesting lady as well. And he had another lady in his life for 15, 16 years, and many people think, including me, that he had a very strong relationship with her too. So he's a very intriguing man. When they took up the bodies, when this church has no crypt, it has a big problem underneath with water. It's built on the River Potter. They had to take up the bodies. They did find they were there side by side. And I'm told Oscar Wilde's father, who was the ear, nose and throat man who got his hands on the skull, kept it out for a while. And then when they were put back in, they put the skulls into the same box. That's what the story tells us. So they're even closer together than they were when they were buried. And that's, if you're interested in Swift, as I say, Google him. And Gulliver's Travels is one of the free books. Gulliver's Travels is not a children's book, it's a very, very strong satirical book on all of us. And he is the most famous man in the cathedral. Now, does anyone have any questions about Swift or anything else? No? If anyone, I'll be around here for a while if anyone else wants to ask me anything else. There's loads of other things of interest in Dublin to see in that. So I hope that you all have a good holiday the rest of your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very good.
Very well.
So this is way better than I could have done. Okay, so I'm back for a bit. This is actually the death mask, as they used to make at that period, of Jonathan Swift.